Hello and welcome to this public lecture series on pathways and paradigms for India's G20 presidency. Today we talk about West Asia or Middle East as the region is popularly referred to. The region is in India's extended neighborhood to the west, utmost importance and of abiding interest. West Asia that straddles three continents of Asia, Africa and Europe is central to the flows of energy and labor. Yet, for decades, the region continues to grapple with geopolitical conflicts, instability, turmoil, and painful transition, impoverishing millions and displacing several others. The geopolitics of West Asia has a rippling effect on the international community. What can India's G20 presidency deliver for the region? To give us a window on this, I am joined by Dr. Rushal T. Goble, an expert on West Asia. Dr. Rushal T. Goble is an assistant professor in Center for West Asian Studies, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. He has written extensively on the region on issues of geopolitics, energy, and multipolarity. He has contributed articles to prestigious journals and has published books and chapters. His latest book this year is on West Asia and the world, geopolitical shifts, multipolarity, and energy developments. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Rushal T. Goble. It's great to have you here, Dr. Goble. Please accept a small token of appreciation.
Thank you all. At the outset, I would like to thank the organizers first and foremost for giving me this opportunity to be here and to present my thoughts on this occasion. The title of my presentation today is G20 Energy and Geopolitics in West Asia. But before going ahead with the formal presentation, I would like to give you all a glimpse of what West Asia is all about, because many of the students here, they don't belong to West Asia and they don't have much knowledge about the region. So socially and religiously, when we talk about West Asia, the region particularly is dominated, or you can say the most important aspect of the region is the language and religion. So in terms of religion, you have Islam as a predominant religion, which is the most important aspect of the community of the region itself. The second important facet when we talk about social aspects or society in West Asia is that the region has a huge population, and a major chunk of that population is young. It's vibrant and looking out for job opportunities, right? So that's the second important facet when we talk about society. When we talk about economy per se, the economy in West Asia is a rentier-state structure basically. And many of these countries in the region, they are basically dependent on these oil and gas revenues or natural resource revenues, as you can say. Talking about politics, we have military and you have the political systems. They go hand in hand, because many of these leaders today, they have come to power with military coups, with the help of military coups. So with this as a background, what I have tried to do is I have tried to frame my presentation into 5 different aspects. Let's begin by understanding West Asian geopolitics, followed by the regional fabric, followed by multipolar environment in the region, the geoeconomic conflicts that are going on in the region in West Asia according to my analysis, and lastly but most important, G20, India and West Asia. So we will head in this particular direction. Talking about geopolitics, and I think I'll have to stand for some time in order to explain. Talking about the geopolitics of West Asia or Middle East, also it's called by the Western countries. The first and the foremost important aspect that lies or that stands before us is the oil revenues or the rentier state structures. So in this particular slide here, we can clearly understand the kind of oil revenues that are being incurred by different countries. Now, obviously, for obvious reasons, you can see that these revenues don't surpass 50%, but that has happened recently. In the earlier times, a major chunk of their revenues used to come from oil and gas sales, basically natural gas sales. So basically, coming from date farming and pearl industry, today these countries are major oil and gas exporters. Number two, most important factor again is investments. So with the discovery of oil, we see that many of these Western population, United States or the European countries, they landed up into the region and they have invested heavily. They have invested billions of dollars. But then the region lies in absolute turmoil. And when the region is in turmoil, what do you do with those investments? Those investments become seem to be called as risky investments. This has been the traditional geopolitical scenario as far as West Asia is concerned. The third important facet is transportation. Now I am going purely on the basis of energy, right? I'm talking precisely on the basis of energy here. The third important facet is the transportation industry. So the transportation industry, with the discovery of oil, what used to happen was only a limited source, only a limited percentage of that resource used to flow into the international market. But over a period of time, the transportation industry has also been revamped. So today you have very large crude carriers or ultra large crude carriers that carry a huge proportion of these assets into the international market, sufficing to the global demand, right? Now, why West Asia is important internationally? This is a very obvious question that comes to our mind. It used to be a date farming, there was fishing industry, there was pearl farming, but it is oil, with the discovery of oil, that the region became more prominent. And you can see that with the help of these two graphs here. One is for gas and this one belongs to oil. You can see the major chunk that is available in West Asia. And this is what the region was attracted about, became attractive. This is where Western countries, United States, as well as Britishers earlier, were attracted to the region. Apart from this, you have one more important facet. Lowest cost of production. The region has the lowest cost of production. If you can see on the slide here, Kuwait, how much does it cost actually? $4.04 per barrel, and in a barrel you have around 187 liters of oil, which is the lowest. Followed by that is Saudi Arabia, which is around $5, in Iran 5.4, so on and so forth. And the last one, the highest, is in UK, which is around $39. It's incurred. This has made the region attractive for the global economies to go and invest there, right? But over a period of time, we see that there is a great geopolitical shift, there is a great geopolitical change that is happening in the region. And I have pointed out a few of them. The first important change is that the region itself is undergoing transition. Why? Because the countries, the regional actors, they are looking for, or they are aspiring for, cleaner sources of energy. This has questioned the basic fundamentals of these countries, so-called rentier economies. This has questioned the basic fundamental, because till now the overall growth of a country was depending on these oil revenues. But over a period of time, that is going to change, and that is changing rampantly. At the same time, it has questioned legitimacy of these governments. Why? Because when you incur oil revenues, these oil revenues are utilized for the development of the people. When there are no oil revenues, for obvious reasons, it's a big question mark. How to fund or how to suffice to people's demands? This is one of the questions. So the legitimacy of these governments is under question mark. The second important factor that I would like to mention here is US-Saudi relations, from engagement to disengagement. Now, some of the facets here which I have mentioned are little old, but they are still on, it's an ongoing process. Why? Because there is a continuous turmoil, there is continuous shift which is taking place in the region. So US-Saudi relations, from engagement to disengagement. From 2003 is the iconic year. 2003 Iraqi invasion. After that, potentially after 2011, Obama administration decided to withdraw some of its troops from Iraq. And what it has resulted in is that the region itself is trying to find a security dynamics for itself. How do we securitize ourselves? This is the basic question before these Gulf countries. And this is where the idea or the concept of Arab NATO comes into picture. Now, time and again, we don't see Arab NATO being discussed. But over a period of time, somewhere, somehow, you will find these Arab NATO discussions taking place in some or the other summits, right? This is second important facet. Number three, again, it replicates the second number, but it is important because of the American shale revolution. I will not go into the details of that because we know much about it. So if there are any questions later on, we can discuss. The rise of nationalism in the Arab world. So this is, again, here I would like to refer to the great Abdul Gamal Nasser, who spoke about the Arab socialist ideas, right? That is pure nationalism. After Nasser, you had people like Syria's former president, former ruler, Bashar al-Assad's father. He was the one, again, who was trying to revive these Arab socialist ideas. But somehow Saddam could not achieve that. And Bashar al-Assad's father, or Bashar al-Assad, also could not achieve that. So we see today there is a rise of nationalism in the face of 2011 Arab uprisings, where people are rising for their own good. People are rising for their own freedom. They want freedom. They want their own share of their own stake in the government. So they are rising up. And this is where, again, a major change that can be seen in the region. Next is regional countries and its ambitions. Now here there are two important countries which I would like to refer to. Number one, for obvious reasons we all know, is Iran. So why Iran is important? Because time and again Iran looks for having its ambitions in the face of peaceful nuclear proposal. But till now it has not been possible. So number one is Iran, that the ambition of Iran has not been granted, has not been possible till this moment. The second important country which I would like to refer here is Turkey. Now, time and again, Turkey thinks that the Ottomans have been ruling the land for so many years now, have so many decades, and all of a sudden you see a country like Saudi Arabia rising up economically. That has not gone well. So time and again you see small skirmishes happening between Turkey and Saudi Arabia. So there is some sense of a conflict there between the regional ambitions of these countries in the within the region. Regional countries and their ambitions, I just finished. Adjusting to fiscal deficits or budgets. Again, it's very important to understand, as I mentioned some time back, that many of these countries are used to live off the rentier profile. So which means that they used to gain a lot of revenues, and from that they used to run their budgets. But consequently, after 2011, everything has drastically changed, and 2014-15 made one more hit, and that was in the face of the American shale oil revolution. So when that happened, OPEC Plus decided to crumble down, made some policies which resulted in crumbling of overall oil prices. And after that happened, how to deal with populations. So this I have already spoken about some time back. Emerging new markets, the Asian markets. So countries like India and China, obviously they are there. Which are the other important countries? Countries like Japan, countries like South Korea and Singapore. And we will be discussing more about it when we talk about Asia in some time. So these are some of the countries which are desperately looking, and they are growing. So there is revolution, there is industrial growth in these countries, and Gulf countries or West Asian countries see a lot of potential in Asian markets. Iran. So Iran, now what happens? Iran is under sanctions at the moment, but what happens if Iranian sanctions are being revoked? Iran also wants to supply that oil and gain a lot of revenues out of it. What happens if the sanctions are revoked? So Iranian millions of dollars worth of Iranian oil will also be flooding into the market. But no one can trade with Iran. So what was the option? In 2019, the British, French and Germans, what they did was they tried to formalize some sort of an agreement called as INSTEX. That is the instrument for supporting trade exchanges. And what this will do is, this will help these countries or some of the European countries to bypass the American sanctions in order to trade with Iran. How far that is going to be possible, only time can tell, not at the moment. And last one is on the slide, the new shift that is taking place is under the fourth industrial revolution. This fourth industrial revolution is very significant because in the face of growing industrial growth, AI technologies are taking their own role. AI is having their own role. So you have major startups which are promoting artificial intelligence. So this is going to be a major game changer. A major geopolitical shift will happen in the coming 5 to 6 years. The second important facet, let me come to the second part of the presentation today, which is the regional fabric. The first point in the regional fabric is Iran has always been perceived as a threat by whom? By another major power, that is Saudi Arabia. Right now, we recently had China brokering a peace deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Now it's too early to celebrate on that, because we don't know what it's going to end up with. So time will tell us how Iran and Saudi Arabia will be peaceful, and that will bring stability in the region. Number two, small states' dependency on bigger states. And here I'll give you an example of how the regional fabric is undergoing change. The regional fabric is undergoing change, for instance, because these small countries like Lebanon, for example, is largely dependent on countries like Saudi Arabia, because nearly 50% of Lebanese population goes and works in Saudi Arabia, sending home remittances. So a major chunk of the growth and development that is taking place in Lebanon is primarily with the help of revenues that are being incurred from countries like Saudi Arabia. Terrorism has always been there. You had Al-Qaeda. After the fall of Al-Qaeda, the splinters, you had Jabhat al-Nusra or ISIS for that matter. And according to some reports, Boko Haram is also linked somewhere to Al-Qaeda. So terrorism is one of the important factors which is again changing or impacting the regional fabric. The ability of small states to grow independent. What is this ability of small states to grow independent? A classic example of this is the 2017 Qatar crisis. Now, when Qatar crisis took place, automatically we understood that now Qatar is going to be suppressed again. It is systematically boycotted by Saudi-led alliance, but that did not happen, and Qatar rose up like anything. So Qatar did not bog down to what Saudis or Saudi-led alliance wanted, but it grew itself. So on one side, where you see small states becoming dependent on bigger actors like Saudi Arabia, on the other side you will have a set of small states which are rising up, and they no longer want to be under the protection umbrella of bigger actors, so-called Saudi Arabia. So they don't say they no longer want that. Ibrahim Accords or I2U2, again the best thing that is happening. A country which has been alienated for so many years altogether. is being systematically now brought into the mainstream. And I'm talking about Israel, to be specific. So at the moment, with I2U2, you have 4 countries which are involved. But eventually, I have no doubt in saying that there will be more and more countries, including Saudi Arabia, which will be a part of this alliance, bringing Israel into the main fold and having more and more trading ties with Israel. So this again is changing the fabric. I hope you are getting the kind of change that is happening in the region. Last, this is what I feel, that more than sectarianism today, it is geopolitics and geoeconomics which is impacting the region. Nobody is much interested about what is happening in terms of Shia-Sunni divide or the sectarian division that is out there. But people are more interested in how to gain market access and how to have that market share. Multipolar environment. Now there are 3 important countries here. This is again a significant point. One is you have United States, you have China, and you have Russia. These 3 countries, they are predominantly active in the region. United States, for that matter, the entire First World War and even the Second World War, United States had a lot of oil reserves when we are talking about energy. Because my topic today is energy, so I'll be speaking particularly about oil and gas. So entire First and Second World War, United States had a lot of oil reserves which it supplied to the Allied powers. In fact, according to some statistics, out of 7 billion barrels, nearly 6 billion barrels were supplied by United States to the Allied powers in order to win. But eventually what happened was, by the end of Second World War, United States realized that it needs to have an access to some overseas oil resources. And consequently, a strategic deal was signed between Saudi Arabia and Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the United States, and the rest is history. But at the same, what is important is that from a twin pillar policy, the twin pillars were Saudi Arabia and Iran till 1979. The minute Ayatollah Khomeini came into power, everything changed. So now, at the moment, we see Saudi Arabia as an important ally and we see Israel as an important ally of United States. But having said that, there is a larger sense of disengagement also which is happening, which is taking place. United States no longer want to invest in the region as it used to. So taking a point from President Obama's administration, what happened after 2011 was they systematically withdrew the soldiers from Iraq. And that was the message that had gone to the rest of the West Asian countries, that United States is no longer interested in providing security to the region. So we need to find our own security now. We need to decide what we need to do and what we don't have to do. Right? So United States I've already spoken about. Now, when we talk about China, this graph, as you can see, this is an overall consumption of China. And here you can see coal, which is 55%, and next to coal immediately, China is dependent on petroleum. So oil makes a major aspect of the energy mix in China's foreign policy. And next to it, you have China's top crude oil producers. Now, first 2 are Russia and followed by Saudi Arabia. It was Saudi Arabia earlier, followed by Russia. Why that changed? There are reasons for that, but we will see in a while. There are 3 important factors, as I mentioned earlier. You have 9/11, you have US shale oil coming into the market and disrupting. You have security withdrawal following 2011. And you continuously, United States has been pointing out human rights issues in the region. Why do the region or West Asia want United States security then? If you're going to point out my human rights issues time and again, right? This is one, and this is primarily where we feel that West Asia is drastically moving towards Asian economies. China is a brilliant example of that. But China, historically also, China is linked. with West Asia. And what is that historical linkage? Following the or taking a threat perception from Iranian Revolution of 79, China aligned or China provided a lot of military hardware to Saudi Arabia at that point of time, particularly intermediate ballistic missiles at that point. But on the other side, China was also providing a lot of these military deals to Iran. So basically, during 1980s and 1988, the 8-year-long Iran-Iraq war, China provided a lot of these missiles or military hardware to Iran. But during 86 or 87, China, I think by mistake, it fired on one of these Kuwaiti vessels, which was carrying American oil. So America called China and told that do not supply Iran with these missiles. They are using it against the Kuwaiti vessels, which are basically carrying our oil. This triggered something else. China stopped supplying Iran with weapons, but China helped Iran in growing their domestic military industry. So this is where China has been playing a balancing role between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And at the same time, in 2016, we see that there are nearly 16 or 17 such agreements which have been signed between China and Iran, to be specific. China also engages West Asian countries with in its OBOR, so Belt and Road Initiative. On this slide, you can see $9.2 billion have been invested by Iran itself. So when Iran is investing, Saudi Arabia will not be left behind. Saudis have invested 8.6, followed by Egypt 13.3. These are some of the figures. There is a big list of the kind of investments that that globally countries have made in China's OBOR policy. Right? Now, here I would like to bring to your notice a very important facet, which is about Russia. Russia is deeply engaged in West Asia. We all know that. But Russia and China, they also have a very strategic deal. And this is where I point to the earlier graph, which I showed you, in which Russia came on the top. There is an engagement or agreement between China and Russia where it is called as oil for loans deal, by which China will be supplying oil to nearly 20 million tons of oil to Russia. And on the other hand, Russia will be providing oil, but China will be providing nearly 25 billion at a very low, that is 6.6% of rate of interest. So there are extra regional agreements which are being signed. So this is where we realize that China, Russia, and Iran, they are tilting towards each other, and they no longer go on the side of the United States or the West, for that matter. Geo-economic conflicts. This brings us to the next point. And why are they called as geo-economic conflicts in the first place? Because as I said earlier, many of these conflicts which are termed to be sectarian, they are sectarian in nature. I'm not denying that personally. This is my opinion. But there is also a larger sense of geopolitics and geoeconomics involved in many of these conflicts which are happening, particularly in West Asia, or rather around the world. There are three important facets: geography, resource, and influence, when we talk about these conflicts. I'll straight away come to this particular graph. Now, these are two set of pipelines. One is from Iran, which is basically a Shia pipeline, and one starts from Qatar, which is primarily, it is also called as the Sunni pipeline. And both of these have one set in common, which is Syria. Now, Syria has always been tilting towards Iran and Russia. So, for obvious sense, if Iranian gas or if Shia pipeline comes into picture, then the region will be largely focusing on the growth of Shia ideology primarily. So there will be a dominance somewhere. So ideology plus economics, geoeconomics rather, there are two important factors. Number two is the Qatari gas, again, which is called as the Sunni pipeline. The idea basically, we will try to understand that the idea is to hold the European market. And why European market is still important is reflected in this, because largely even today natural gas plays a very important role next to oil. And these are recent figures, not that old, 2020 figures. So when Russia has problems with Ukraine, by the way, Russia Ukraine problems are not new. They are since 1990s, but at those times the problems were primarily because of the gas transit fee between Russia and Ukraine. But at this juncture, when there is war going on, Russia is unable to sell its gas or oil to the European markets. This is where West Asia or Middle East comes to the forefront. The second important case that we have in front of us is again Yemen. Now, the conflict is waged at multiple levels. We can call it the Saudi-led conflict with the Houthis in Yemen. But there is other set of analysis which mentions that why why geoeconomics could not be involved. So primarily, the conflict is basically because of the important ports that needs to be controlled by external entities, and it cannot go into the hands of the Houthis mainly, right? Houthis are basically who are supported by Shia Iran. So this I have put down for your reference here. We have three important aspects here when we are talking about West Asia. You have the alliances, you have these projected threats, and you have national interest which are at stake. So we have these countries which are alliances. When we are talk about projected threats, North Korea is an addition to that. So North Korea is also one of those projected threats. But the national stake, whose stake is involved in these? One is China, who has invested, who is a major investor, who has brought Iran and Saudi Arabia together through a peace deal. And number two is Russia, which has actually sent its troops in Syria to fight for the Syrian cause. G20, India, and West Asia. Now this is important because that's the main aspect. Now G20 works on different areas, and some of these areas, it could be food security, it could be climate, it could be trade, infrastructure. And one of the most prominent ones is energy, because energy is something which drives your economy. Energy is something which is responsible for the growth of your industries. So that's why energy becomes very, 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 very important. This figure again, it reflects India's overall energy dynamics. What India is looking at is coal, number one, and next to it is petroleum, and then you have natural gas. You have other set of renewable powers also, but these coal and gas stays as the topmost priority for India even today. So these are our imports, particularly from India. India imports 60%, China 41%, South Korea 70%, Japan 89%, and Singapore 69%. So these are our imports for 2019. These are 2019 data. But having said that, what has been India's policy towards energy dynamics? India has three important policies. Number one, to develop indigenous resources. Whatever resources you have, we have nearly 4.5 million tons of oil with us, and we have substantial amount of gas also as well. And number two is, if we are running short of these to suffice to our domestic demand, what do? We import from outside. And this is where we have been importing from West Asia for quite some time, from Africa. But recently, we also started to import oil from United States. So US being a new contender, we have also started to import from US. The third important policy which Indian government follows is to have energy assets. In the face of SPRs, strategic petroleum reserves, we have SPRs within the country, in the southern part, and we have overseas energy assets. We have stakes in different countries, right? And these stakes are in countries like Iran, Iraq, Libya, Syria, and UAE. These are our oil and gas imports. Oil imports from Iraq, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, and majorly for LNG, we are dependent on Qatar. That is the most important. So in the middle of Arab unrest, in the middle of the American shale oil coming into picture, in the middle of war and conflict that is going on in case of Ukraine, and you have sanctions imposed on countries like Russia, all of these aspects play a dominant role and impact on the global oil and gas prices, including which have impact for countries like India. G20. The basic idea of G20 now is the idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which precisely speaks about sustainability. One world, one family, and one earth. So it basically it is premised on the fact that we preserve these resources for the future of this world. And this is where how do we do that? By burning fossil fuels, we are not going to be or have zero carbon emissions by burning fossil fuels. So what do? We need to use natural resources. So we have International Solar Alliance. We also have the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. And therefore, we are also promoting a large aspect of renewable energy resources. So these three are the basic ideas of how India is also going about. What has India achieved till now? In terms of installed renewable energy capacity is 163 gigawatts as of August 2022 data. But this is being looked into the future, and what is expected is that 35 to 40 gigawatts of additional energy will be generated, and which will be a total of 405 gigawatts. So the idea basically is to provide two A's for each and every individual of Global South. One is affordability and one is accessibility of energy to each and every individual who may be living in the poorest country of this world. That's the basic idea of G20. The country has set an enhanced target of 500 gigawatts altogether from non-fossil fuel based technologies. So it has been a pledge under Panch Amrit, the world's largest expansion plan of renewable energy resources. G20's energy transitions and G20 energy group, basically the mission is to provide these two A's which I mentioned about: accessibility and affordability of cleaner sources of energy to each and every individual of Global South. Thus, cleaner source of energy is a very important aspect of G20, and India is going to play a major role in that. This is our overall capacity targets, which are by 2030 and beyond. So by 2030 and beyond, Kuwait will be having an additional of 15% of renewable energy capacity, while Qatar will be having additional of 20%. Saudi Arabia will have 9.5 gigawatts additional, and UAE will have 5 gigawatts additional. So this is the kind of development plan that the Gulf countries or the West Asian countries are also looking forward to. Unfortunately or fortunately, only the developed nations or economically powerful countries in West Asia will be able to achieve these targets. Poor countries like, or countries which are in turmoil, which are in conflict like Yemen, they don't have that kind of economic prowess to pursue this renewable energy. and therefore they have to be dependent on these fossil fuels for a longer period of time. So unless and until renewable energy, it goes into each and every country, and the country's governments pursue it very rigorously, unless and until that happens, it's very difficult for alternative energies to come into picture. uh, with this, I think this was the last slide. I'll stop here, and looking forward to if any questions, if at all. Thank you so much.
The complexity of West Asian geopolitics, and you have put a wide range of issues that cut across the stability of the region. You've alluded to the energy flows and the centrality of this region. Now, we know with the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, there has been significant rerouting of the energy. Can you give us a sense of what it is like now?
Okay, thank you, first of all, for hearing patiently, and thank you for the question. The substantial rerouting because of the Ukraine crisis, it's taking place, and it's happening particularly. UAE is doing that because Fujairah is one important place, which is the third largest. It can hold the third largest holding capacity it has, next to Singapore and Rotterdam. So Fujairah plays a very important role, and it has been holding a lot of UAE's, Russia's oil particularly, which is primarily to be headed to Asian markets like China and India. So this is what is going to happen. But because the West is no longer interested in buying Russian oil, that is one important thing. Because, and also in addition to the sanctions, Fujairah stays very important, specifically for Asian markets. Thank you.
Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for such a wonderful lecture. Sir, under the changes section, you interconnected West Asia aspiring for a clean source of energy with the legitimacy of the leadership. Sir, I missed that point. Can you please come again?
Sure. When these West Asian countries, since they are dependent on resource, and they provide cradle to grave, for everything, for the population in these countries. So when they are providing for that, for your everything, right, for individuals, the individuals are not supposed to ask any questions. That is for sure. The minute I use taxation policy, so value added tax was recently being used in many of these countries. There was a big uproar from populations, also from people in these countries, but value added tax came for the first time. And this taxation policy, which means if you are paying tax, you have the right to ask questions to the government. So this questions the legitimacy of the ruling communities. That's what the point was. Thank you. There are two things here. Number one, Israel, I think in 1999 discovered, I think in 1999, yes, it discovered a lot of gas reserves. So it has the potential, along with other countries like Egypt is another one. You have Syria also, which already have a lot of oil reserves. So Israel has discovered a lot of gas reserves, which can be a potential to be exported to the European markets. That has a huge potential to do that. Israel has that potential. That is number one. So Israel has, apart from these natural resources, there are plenty of other opportunities which Israel has, the positives, which the other countries are lacking. So there could be a trade-off that you help us in for the some sense of nuclear development, and then we can join the grouping. So this is just one aspect of it, but Israel has these resources. And how much, the question for me is, personally, when I look at this particular issue, is how far can you alienate somebody or a country? How far can you do that? That's the important question. So ultimately there will be a point where there cannot be no alienation of any individual country. Countries have to be brought in if you want to grow, if you want to have a sustainable future. That's the whole crux. Thank you. I hope I have answered that. Thanks.
If we look at the current geopolitical scenario in the world, there is a lot of discussion and forward movement in terms of multilateral and unilateral organizations and expansion, for example, of BRICS, SCO, and a lot of focus is on West Asia. In such a scenario, what do you think would be the future of G20 as far as all these issues related to sustainable development and all its focus areas are concerned? Thank you.
Any organization, it begins with a small grouping. For example, I2U2. For example, BRICS. But BRICS, as we have already, we all have read the news that they are planning to extend. They have extended their membership to other countries also, including Egypt and Iran and Saudi Arabia. How does this work? In international politics, when we say that there are small groupings, we eventually realize that these groupings cannot stay alive if there are small groupings. So eventually the groupings have to be enlarged, and you have to take into picture all the countries, most of the important countries. Furthermore, the region is so important. It stands at the centerpiece. If you look at the map, it stands at the centerpiece. United States, for US, why was it important? It became important because it had the Pacific Command, it had the African Command, it had the European Command. The Central Command was somewhere not there, and this became a major focus. Oil and gas, invention of these resources added to that benefit. But these multilateral organizations have to be expanded if there has to be a growth, number one, and if there has to be sustainability. If you really believe in Vasudeva Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, and one world, which precisely means and which precisely says that you take everybody into account, that's the way to go for peace. So G20 has a bigger role to play. Why? Because you already have many countries from within West Asia. You have these powerhouses which are a part of G20, and you have such important aspects like climate change, food security. The Middle East food corridor is one of those important aspects. Issues like migration has become such an important aspect. More than 4 million people have fled to the European countries during the Syrian crisis. Can we believe that? And many of them, they drowned. And where are they going? Where are they heading? They are all heading up to most of them are heading to the Western European countries. And Western Europe now is tired. It now wants these migrants to go back. How do we solve these global problems of food security, of energy security, and the issues such as migration? So this is where I feel that G20 this year it's with us, and I hope G20 carries or takes all of these issues into consideration. They will, because that's the agenda. So I hope I have answered. Thank you. When we talk about drawing the map of West Asia, one thing that comes to our mind is the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Systematically drawn without any thinking of which country is geographically significant, what are the sectarian identities of these countries. It was clearly divided, and French and the Britishers, they ruled and they governed. China has not been, at least in my understanding, China has not been a part of that kind of categorization of these states. China primarily came into the region mostly looking for oil. That was the major crux of their necessity, because back home they had such a lot of growth that they wanted to keep up with that pace. And this is where you find that after 1990s, to be precise, and if I'm not missing out, 1993 to be precise, China entered formally And this is where we see a lot of agreements. From then onwards, China has achieved a position. In fact, Asian economies like India and China, they have achieved a position in West Asia to stabilize the governments. This is one classic example is why would China bring Iran and Saudi Arabia on a table? Why China wants to do that? China, because China wants, there is nothing much to talk about it at the moment, but there needs to be a stability in the region, which is fruitful to consumer states like India and China, and it's fruitful for the producers as well, like Iran and Saudi Arabia for that matter. This is what I feel, sir. Thank you.
And you have given the map of new geopolitical architecture, starting from the rentier state to loss of legitimacy and the diversification and sustainable development. It's a very good idea. My view is that in this context, as you know that India is the leader of G20 at the present moment, an international solar energy alliance was launched in a Paris Peace Conference with the initiative and the leadership of the head of the state of France as well. And this organization of ISA, its headquarters is in Haryana, and India is the leader of International Solar Energy Alliance. Saudi Arabia is also a member of G20. As I was discussing with you also earlier, that traffic of cancer passes through many of the West Asian nations, particularly Saudi Arabia, Oman, UAE. There is enough possibility of solar energy cooperation between India and GCC states. If you look at the Vision 2030, either launched by Prince Salman bin or Jayed or others, Vision 2030, or in that sense, Vision 2040 of Oman, it is categorically spelled out that diversification, sustainable development, and transparency, clean energy, affordable and clean energy. These are the key variables of the vision documents, particularly to detour the current economic impasse from the rentier to non-rentier economy. And in this context, as you have rightly analyzed the details regarding sustainable development, I'd like to know from you how India can lead, particularly in the solar energy section, because Gujarat is an important, prominent area where already you have taken the initiatives. So how we can lead in this section, particularly to augment solar energy so that we can ensure food security, sustainable development, and we can mitigate the climate crisis. Thank you.
We've already taken this initiative of International Solar Alliance along with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is one of the, it's a desert land. So for obvious reasons, you will have more sun, and but it also has its own challenges. Unlike the uneven climate that we have. So all of a sudden you'll find this climate change, what it has done is all of a sudden it's hot sunny weather and it starts raining. So the entire process of doing that is falls down, right? What is important is that in addition to solar power, in addition to solar energy, what we need to do, and this is what is my personal analysis or feeling, is that we need to rely on other alternative sources of energy, which is, of course, wind is, you have wind energy, you have hydro, but in addition to those, we need to take into account biomass, right? Biomass that constitutes, and we have seen in my earlier slides, in even China, they use biomass. India also, we use biomass, right? So we need, so this is what is called as diversification of our energy mix, the kind of energy mix that we have. Don't depend just on alternative sources of energy. Don't depend just on fossil fuels, but widen it up in such a manner that you have all sorts of energies into your energy basket. That's what is important. G20 is envisioning that. So we are not focused only, of course we have these alliances, but International Solar Alliance for example, but our focus is also to harness other sources of energy. That's how it will be sustainable. So this is what I feel. Thank you, sir.
Think of having a Southeast Asian electric grid, particularly because Arunachal Pradesh and most of the northeastern states, they have sufficient hydro energy. So also Bhutan and Bangladesh, in the case of BCIM or BBN corridors are concerned. My particular query is that in this context, can you conceive of Indo-Gulf grid corridor? Because when you think of one sun, one world and one future, so similarly one sun, one grid and one future. So is there any possibility of this grid? Because there is a corridor which can be led through the sea lanes and also land lanes. We have SN High 1, we have SN High 2, we have Arab Masrek corridor. There are different corridors out there. And grid corridor is very much possible. So can you just highlight or enlighten us this? Thank you.
India GCC grid, that is possible in long term. At the moment, GCC countries are having their own grid. So we can clearly understand that how through grids we can connect from one country to another. So there is an inherent GCC grid which is in existence. If you put India into picture now, India and GCC, there are a lot of issues in between. There are a lot of technical issues in between, so it's going to be difficult. This is what I think.
Thank you.
I have two observations, and in the beginning, the way you have stated about and explained about this Arab nationalism. So somewhere we are missing. Of course, it is not a part of your discussion. This Libya or North Africa, but without touching this North Africa region, and we know the amount of energy or gas Libya is producing. And this is the one reason why Libya is, targeted by external actors, precisely United States. And the way, and before that, I'm just not a question, that is what I'm, and before that, the way Iraq, Saddam Hussein had started about asserting their identity. This is all about assertion of identity. So one side, the country, Iraq, Libya, Egypt, they are asserting for their identity. Other side, US, precisely I'm talking about, it is in this region to, how to break this identity, how to suppress this identity. This kind of division, debate is going on. And the second issue that is a very important, you refer about 2011 Arab uprising. Of course, it is a turning point. But as far as Arab uprising is concerned, most of the revolutionary are those revolted against the regime. Their dream was for the democracy building in the region. But what was the interest of US, France, and Britain? Their interest was something different. In fact, they have legitimized the dictatorship. They are not interested at all for democracy building in the region. And after 1 decade, you just see the outcome of entire Arab uprising. And another important observation, that is of course a question, where India is taking oil from this US also. This shale, you are talking about shale gas. Shale gas is, of course, production cost is much more higher than what we are getting from West Asia. I can say 6-7 times higher than what we are getting from this West Asian country. So how we are trying to promote, or this is a kind of jargon, the way it is popularized. Shale gas is coming in West Asia. Shale gas is going to become an alternative to the West Asian gas. This requirement. which is not, of course. And that is why US is also very much confident it is a false propaganda. This cell gas production is a much more expensive, and we cannot. And another important, this I2, U2, and many this agreement. This is a kind of legitimizing only this Israel in this region. Through Israel, they can make entry into this region. That is the only debate in my understanding. I may be wrong. Right, this is a matter of debate. And most of the thing you have discussed, and I can say, yeah, you have touched upon most of the issue. And I at the outset, I congratulate you for your wonderful presentation. Thank you, Dr. Vishal.
Oil can never see. No other regions, they have tried their best, their level best. No other regions have been that kind of popular, intriguing, and have achieved that kind of status in the international politics as West Asia has. I can say that not because I belong to the center of West Asian studies, but in a larger context, if you see, you be in turmoil, you be in conflict, time and again, you have proved your mettle. West Asia has proved its mettle. Time and again, whenever there were conflicts, a country like Saudi Arabia has never stopped supplying oil to the global markets. At that time, it was called a swing producer, right? So it could swing, it could increase its production immediately if at all there is a crisis somewhere, and it could suffice to the global demand. So West Asia can never be, shale oil can never replace the West Asian economies. That is for sure. And it may be for because of my love that I'm speaking about the region, but that's I feel is the truth, and that's my analysis. Thank you.
Okay, maybe it would be useful if you can also identify what are the promises the region holds on which we can build upon.
Thank you for that question. There are a lot of aspects, a majority of aspects that G20 should focus on, and I think we are focusing, India along with other member states. That is, migration is one of the important issues. Food security is another important issue. Some time back, I mentioned about the Middle East food corridor. Food security is another. The basic water security is such an important and prime issue. For example, the Euphrates River, which flows from Turkey, Syria, and then to Iraq, is being drying up completely. What is going to happen to the food security? By 2050, 60% of your current agricultural production should be increased by 2050 in order to feed those that extra population. How we are going to suffice? G20, I think, is going to look very seriously in all of these dynamics, including water security, food security, and other related aspects. This is what I feel.
Thank you. I think we've come to a close of a very interesting and debatable session, and it can continue to go on. But please join me in thanking Dr. Vishal Goble. I thank all the participants, dear colleagues, and students.